Good afternoon. We are starting week 2 of our online presentations, and today we are going to be covering IXL skills GM1 and M2. GM1 is I will be able to find the measure of the side of a triangle parallel to its mid-segment, and the formula that's associated with it is mid-segment equals the parallel side of a triangle divided by 2. And then the second skill will be I will be able to use the bisector of an angle to find the measure of corresponding parts of angles. I want you to remember that we're going to again be looking for you to get a minimum score of 85. On each skill. And the reason why we want you to get a minimum score of 85 is that is considered the mastery level for each of these skills. And as you know, with these IXL skills, you're able to stop them and in fact, you could stop them, close your computer down, come back to them the next day, and continue on with them and keep bringing your score up until you get to an 85. After that, you don't need to continue. You can stop. But if you wish to, like quite a few people have done, you can actually keep working until you get to 100. And that is I think extremely important for a lot of people. But in terms of grades, just remember we do not know what the status is on grades yet. However, tomorrow the district board will be meeting in the evening, and we will know something more about grades on Wednesday. So we'll learn about how we can weave these into grades. Rest assured, eventually we should be able to do something with these skills in terms of grades. But remember that at this particular point in time, anything you do will, in regards to IXL will not reduce your score, your overall grade score. And in fact, it could only enhance it once we get to the point where the school district determines exactly what it is they want to do with scores. All right, so let's go on. And if you remember, before I told you, use a sheet of paper covered with a plastic sheet or inside a folder like this one is as your means of answering these questions. You can do graph work on a grid paper. You can turn the grid paper over and you can use the other side for just regular calculations. And of course you can use your handy homemade eraser to erase everything, and then you've got your sheet clean for the next problem that you're going to do. It's the most efficient way to work these things. Okay. So let's go on to our first example. So this example is drawn from the M1, which was mid-segments. So the question is, how do I find the measure of a mid-segment or its parallel base in a triangle? So in this particular example, A, K here is the midpoint of line segment GJ. And I is the midpoint of line segment HJ. They want to know, well, they tell you that GH equals 8. So if GH is 8, what is the measure of KI? So what you're going to do is you're going to use, again, the formula that we talked about before. And the formula, again, was that mid-segment equals the parallel or the measure of the parallel side of a triangle, and I'll just use the symbol for a triangle, divided by 2. All right, so here's the mid-segment right here. It's KI. We know that because that joins that particular line segment is joining KJ and HI by means of midpoint. So this is the mid segment. So since it's the mid-segment, then we know that that's going to equal the length of the side parallel to the mid-segment, and that would be GH divided by 2. And GH, we've been given, equals 8. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. So the mid-segment here, which is KI, equals 4, and that's your answer. Okay? Pretty simple stuff to do. Now, if you remember, the last thing we did was mid-segments. And so this was one of the variations on what we did with the mid-segment. Now I'm going to show you what happens when you know the measure of the mid-segment, but you don't know the measure of the parallel angle. So in this case, X is the midpoint of WY. Here's WY. And Z here is the midpoint of VY. Again, they want to know, they say if XZ equals 5, that's the mid-segment, what is the measure of WV? So we know that XZ equals the measure of the parallel line, which is WV, divided by 2. And they give you, so you're going to substitute 5 for XZ. So that means 5 equals WV divided by 2. Now you want to get WV by itself, so you're going to undo. So that means you're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 2, because that's the opposite of dividing by 2. So I'm going to multiply times 2 over here, and I'm going to multiply 5 times 2 over here. So 5 times 2 is 10, and 10 equals, now WV divided by 2 times 2, the 2 and the 2 over 2 is 1, that leaves you with 1 WV, or the length of WV. And so there's your answer, WV is 10. Okay? So here I'm showing you how to use this in algebra form. Now, when you do these problems, it's not going to tell you to do all of this algebra, but I'm telling you do the algebra. Yes, at the beginning, you are going to be able to see this and say in your head, this is what it is. But at some point, you're going to start to make mistakes. So if you're following this format, then you're going to do just fine with it, okay? So again, just to be clear, the problem that you will get will give you a picture like the one you see on the left here, and they'll show one of the values, either the mid-segment or of the side, and they'll say what is the value of the side that is not either the side or the mid-segment where the value is not given. And you can look at this and you can say, all right, this is the mid-segment's 5, this has got to be 10, and you put the answer in and they'll say, great, that's correct. But when this gets more difficult, when it's harder to do as you move along, because as you know, when you're working with these, the problems get harder and harder. Do what you see here. Okay? All right. Last example. So in example 2, we're looking at bisectors of angles. So the question is, how do I use the bisector of an angle to find the measure of corresponding parts of triangles? Okay? So they give you this problem. It says if angle WXZ, now look at your picture, here's W, here's X, here's Z, that's this angle here. If that's congruent to YXZ, so here's YXZ, that's this angle here, and YZ, let's see, YZ equals 33, what is the measure of WZ? Okay, we want the measure over there. All right, so for that, you need to remember the rule regarding the measure of angle bisectors. And let me just see if I happen to have it off the top of my head. I can provide it, but I'd like to give you the actual example. Let's see if it's here. If not, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to give it to you. So let me just do it that way. So bottom line is angle bisectors. What they say is if you've got a line here that has a point that bisects the angle. So in this case, x bisects this, the ray xz bisects this angle wzy, then that means then that the measures from w to x and x to y are congruent to each other. And for that matter, also the measures from w to z and z to y, those are congruent to each other. Now I've shown one tick mark for the congruency up here, 2 for the congruency down here, because the measures of w, z, and y, z may be the same, but the measures of w, x, and xy are the same, but they aren't the same as the 33 down here. Okay? So we're only trying to find out this measure over here, and we know that this measure is 33. So pretty easy to figure this out then, without going through too much math. You can obviously come down to the conclusion that this other side has to equal 33. So what's the reason for that? The angle bisector theorem says that if a point on a ray that travels from the vertex of an angle is the bisector of the angle, then the measures of the sides of the triangle are congruent, or triangles I should say, are congruent. Okay, so that's pretty much all you really need to state from something like that. All right? Okay, and so again with this, you're not going to have to actually come up with a reason on this. You're just simply going to be coming up with a value. But this is the reason why, and you need to know that as you go along, because the pictures will get more complex and you need to be able to recognize that. Okay? All right, so that takes us through the basics for what we're going to cover today. Now, I want to remind you again tomorrow. Hopefully we'll hear from the board. We won't hear until the end of the day. And then hopefully Wednesday we will know what we're going to be doing with grades. We're going to continue right now with review. One of the other questions that the teachers have asked and that supposedly the board is checking into is exactly what they want to have us cover through the end of the year. Right now we're doing review, and if you remember, this angle bisector and mid-segment material was the last thing that you took a test on. And yes, I'm still waiting to put those grades in. I've got the tests, they're here, they're graded, but they are not available yet for us to go over in the grade book. So once we hear from the district, we'll know which way to jump. All right, talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye now.